Hey, hello, greetings and welcome. All right, so we're going to cover a whole range of topics in these this next 10 or so videos. And the first topic is entering into Samadhi. What is Samadhi, and how do you enter into Samadhi? Now, Samadhi is a state of concentration in which equanimity arises and insight arises. So there are many different ways to enter into this state of concentration where everything becomes equanimous and you get clear insight into whatever you're looking at. So your most basic and simplest way of generating this concentrated mind state that creates equanimity is engaging life force using a fullness method. So when you're doing the building the wall Qigong exercise, you'll get an electromagnetic feeling between the hands. When you pore breathe this and you stretch it into your structure so that your whole body becomes full of life force, and then you make the life force your meditation object and you fill the awareness with life force, there's no space for thoughts to arise, there's no space for emotions to arise, there's no space for bodily sensations. You go into this concentrated state in which the mind is too full, so everything becomes quiet. So you create a yang state to produce yin. And this nourishes the body, it nourishes the energy field, it nourishes the mind and gives consciousness the energy it needs to produce concentration. Because the mind is in a body, it requires energy to animate itself. For the mind to have clarity, for the mind to have energy, for the mind to have concentration, it requires life force. So this is a basic precondition for concentration. So if you look at any of the yogic schools, they have perfect posture. They stretch the fascia, tune the fascia to the prana, to the life force, and this fuels and animates the mind. Then the mind can concentrate itself on a mantra or whatever the spiritual practice is to enter into Samadhi. The fullness method, where you fill your awareness with prana, with life force, and that life force becomes so, it occupies all the space, becomes so intense, there's no space for thoughts to arise. There's a type of equanimity which is forced into place. This forced equanimity is much easier to achieve than a softening equanimity. For instance, if you practice Vipassana, calm abiding type of meditation exercises where you observe the rising and falling away of bodily sensations, feelings and mind, it'll take many years of training to enter into equanimity, into Samadhi, into concentration. And then all the years of training that you went through to achieve this deep state of concentration, equanimity, accumulate an energy memory. So every time you want to enter into meditation, into Samadhi, it takes you hours to get there, because this is what your body, your feeling and your mind remembers. So this isn't a very efficient way of entering into concentrated mind to achieve equanimity. Remember, the goal is to concentrate your mind to create equanimity, to generate insight. This equanimity which generates insight allows your mind to pay attention to things and understand them. So it's a way of unlocking truth. Don't get caught up in the Samadhi. Recognize what it's for, so you can move past it straight into how do you get into equanimity, how do you get into that state where you can translate information through equanimity to have insight. Equanimity also acts as a doorway to move between different mind states, move up and down a vibrational scale. So entering into Samadhi is literally that. You walk through the door and you switch it on. And this is important to remember, that when you activate life force, you switch the life force on, you fill yourself to the point where a thought can't exist as a stray thing passing through, where everything is full and then everything becomes quiet. The extremeness of the yang, of the concentrated mind, produces the yin. This is the simplest method. The next method is equanimity of the elements. You meditate on the fire element. Whatever tradition you're in, whether you're in the Indian tradition or the Tibetan, the Buddhist, ways of breaking down the elements. You meditate on equanimity of the element. You pour breathe the prana, the life force, until it releases time. You slow it down, and then you break that life force apart into fire, air, water, and earth. Each one of these you meditate on equanimity of the element. So in the Hermetic method, we'll breathe the fire element into the head region and meditate on equanimity of the fire and how the head region dominates the fire element through the rest of the body. Then we'll put the air into the chest region and meditate on the equanimity of the air element and then how it regulates the rest of the body. Same with the water region, same with the earth. So it creates an astral equanimity of the elements. That astral equanimity of the elements dissolves mental static, it dissolves emotional static, and everything becomes very quiet. So you can anchor this to a ritual, to a particular mudra or to a mantra. You anchor it and then you enter into that equanimity, you enter into that stillness through activating ritual. So this is an astral equanimity. That astral equanimity increases your ability to translate knowledge, much more so than the vital equanimity. The astral equanimity is where all your emotions are contained, where all your knowledge is contained, all your memories, your vocabulary, your intellectual processing ability. It's all astral. Everything you've ever learnt and memorized is in your astral body. So when you balance the elements and then stream light through the astral body, that equanimity allows you to translate and use your intellectual function to understand and express that stream of knowledge in a way that other people can understand. It'll also allow you to reference information so that your own understanding increases when you're in that equanimous state and you stream the light through and you contemplate and journal and regurgitate that information through thinking about it, through going to the equanimity underneath it, through feeling it, and then journaling it and cycling. And as you cycle, each time you cycle it through that process, you get a deeper insight and understanding. And it's underlying equanimity which unlocks that understanding. So depending on whether it's a scientific piece of data, whether it's a metaphysical piece of data, whatever it is, there's this process of contemplation and emptying out that contemplative state to generate the insight as you expand the space around it. So that type of equanimity is very good for people who are practicing the intellectual path. They really want to understand the process. Very good for teachers and so forth. Okay, the next type of equanimity or Samadhi training which generates equanimity is the mental equanimity. So we can use any of the gates, the eye gate, the ear, the taste, scent, feeling and so forth, and the mind gate for generating the quietude within the spirit. In order to access the spirit, you need to first release time, slow everything down, doing the 4-cycle breath to move into the astral body. Then release space, feather off the edges of your perceived boundaries to move into spirit, move into pure consciousness. Consciousness doesn't have any edges. When you're in a body, it's contained in the body, so you have a perception of my mind only extends to the space around me, what I can see, feel, hear through these sense gates. But when we move into the spirit senses, we're removing the boundaries of time and space. What this allows you to do is when you visually concentrate or use sound concentration, and the concentration moves from the astral hearing through the spirit hearing, then you develop a different type of one-pointed concentration which has a byproduct of equanimity, which activates a spirit sense within the gate that you're working on. So this type of insight gives you an understanding that's different to the astral translating ability. It's a type of inner knowing where you look at a particular frequency, an energy, a feeling, a universal love, compassion, a Buddhist teaching, whatever it might be, and you know it. You just tune in and you go, I understand this, but I can't verbalize it. So this is a spirit sense. If you want to verbalize it and share it with another person, you have to bring the astral body into equanimity to be able to process it and intuitively express it in form. Because spiritual knowledge is something that exists outside of form. And this is where Buddhism is very special and very unique because it can only be known in the spirit. So as soon as you start translating it into a cognitive, intellectual framework, it starts breaking down. So I generally make a rule where I break down the process, how to develop the spirit senses so you get direct experience, rather than breaking down the teaching on a particular topic into an intellectual property, because it has no real value for anyone to intellectually think about a precept or intellectually think about Buddhist ideas. What you want to do is tune the spirit into the frequency and get spiritual nourishment, so there's an ascension of raising in frequency of the spirit as you move upwards. So this is very important, that you don't get preoccupied with academic intellectual knowledge about Buddhism, but you develop your sensitivity to energy so that when you put your mind on a frequency, your spirit gets inner knowing, and that inner knowing develops a type of nourishment where your spirit is nourished and starts waking up on all these multifaceted different ways, and that energy streams back down through the astral physical and becomes functional in your path of service. But in your path of ascension, you don't need to academically understand something. Your spirit needs to sense it and use it as a vehicle to raise upwards. So this is how people with a low level of education, who are very grounded earthly people, can attain very high states of awareness without reading a book. You don't need to read a book on it. You need to concentrate, release time, concentrate, release space, enter the emptiness underneath form, and then raise up the vibrational scale through equanimity. By being form, emptiness, you're at the midpoint of equanimity, which allows you to elevate yourself. You don't need to understand how it works. You just need to understand the process of how to practice. What is the most efficient way of releasing time to enter into Samadhi? What is the most efficient way of releasing space to deepen that Samadhi? What is the most efficient way of releasing time and space together to move the spirit into infinity, to work with the Akashic mind states, so that that underlying equanimity in all these subconscious levels deepens. And that's where you come closer and closer to the highest. So this idea of entering into Samadhi to create equanimity and insight has layers. It's a layering process. Vital on the bottom. You need good posture. You need to animate your life force so that it can animate your mind. It needs to be generated in the lower so that all the layers above it have fuel. Without this, I've never seen anyone generate a real, genuine Samadhi. You need good posture. As a teacher, first thing you teach people to do is tune the breath, the fascia, the life force together so that they have power. They have the power to animate the mind, and the mind can concentrate and do what it needs. If you're working with formless jhana, you need a large amount of life force in your physical body so that the mind is supported in a formless way. There's a counterbalance there. If you don't understand how to cultivate this pranic force, when you spend time in Akash, you become very drained, very emaciated, and very weak. It's very important that you maintain a balance in the physical when the mind is outside of the physical. Okay, so there's a few ideas on entering into Samadhi and using whichever of the sense gates you want within the spirit to, whether using sound, concentration, or feeling, or taste, or scent, to enter into your concentration to create the equanimity, to open up the sense gate in the spirit so your spirit senses become more active. If you're a teacher, you need to balance the astral really, really well. If you're not a teacher and you can just sit in meditation and step out of your astral nature, and it's not that important to balance the astral nature, but to have much more concentration in the spirit, you can also do that. But you will require to be doing a lot more hours of meditation if you're ignoring the astral body. If you're having to interact with people, your interaction with people is your meditation. It is part of your practice time. So you need to balance the elements, cultivate compassion for those interactions, cultivate universal love, cultivate goodwill, and learn to emanate that in your daily life as a part of your emanation, and use them as meditation objects so that those interactions help you develop an ascent. If you don't have to interact with people, you need far less astral training. You can do more training in the spirit and activate spirit senses and work on a higher state, higher frequency, work with the formless jhanas and so forth. So the way you live your life, because every breath is spiritual development. Your spiritual life is all the time. It doesn't happen for 1 hour of meditation in the morning and evening. It's a stream. It's continually moving forward in time. You're spiritually developing yourself all the time. What you do and how you interact with your environment is going to dictate that. So if you don't have to interact with people, that astral sensitivity is not needed as much. So you don't need to put the astral elements into the same type of equanimity that you would if you're having a lot of interactions with people. Okay, we'll leave it there for this topic and we'll move on to the next. Thank you for your time, and see you in the next video.